Button.
All right, we are live. Welcome. How is everybody doing today? I hope that things are going well. I am here with my friend Doug, who is
Hello.
going to teach us all about the intersection of sex and disability, which is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart. It's something that I feel that we don't talk about enough in society, and so I'm glad to get a conversation going. So, how
I
you
don't know.
doing, Doug?
I don't know so much about teach as more just run my mouth a lot.
Well, sometimes we all have something to teach each other, you know,
That's fair.
and sometimes running our mouth will help somebody go, "Holy shit, I never thought of it that way." And so in a way, we are all students and teachers.
Indeed. I like that notion. I mean, I'm a fan of saying, you can't go a day without learning something new.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's start with a disclaimer.
Ah,
Hello, Scotland, Queensberry Den. Welcome.
oh, I know those. I know some of those people.
Haha.
Good evening, Queensberry Eden.
Oh,
How are you, my
disclaimer.
friend? Oh, yes, disclaimer. So, I have given a bit of this talk before, but tonight I'm going to focus more on some of the heavier aspects of this.
Okay.
So, trigger warnings: this discussion will include topics like sexual assault and forced eugenics, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So, please guard your spoons if you're watching, and make sure that you take care of yourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, if at any time you need to get up and walk away, do so. The video is live now, but it will be up on YouTube. And that way, if you want to watch it that way, then you can pause it and walk away if you need to.
Quite, quite. And hi, SJ. I know you too.
Welcome, welcome.
Cheers, people.
Cheers. I've already smoked my imbibe thing. It's
Your
imbibe.
imbibe thing.
Implies drinking, though. So,
Well, potato, tomato.
yeah, blueberry pancake. It is what it is.
Pancakes. Okay, so SJ, Harry, which would you prefer we call you this evening? All right. So Queensberry, if you choose, I can call you Michelle. That's fine.
Welcome.
So more Twitch friends and Discord friends.
Outstanding.
These are very awesome peoples.
Yay, all of us are coming together.
Hooray! Either one that comes out of my mouth first. Fair enough.
All right. All right. Where should we start?
So, little about me first. I am a 47-year-old lifelong disabled guy, cis man. I have multiple disabilities. The two main ones being spina bifida and hydrocephalus, otherwise known as water on the brain.
Mhm.
I've been a wheelchair user since 1987, if my math is right. But I do my own thing. I live my own life. I live in my own apartment. I drive. I work a full-time job.
You clubbed like a mad fucking beast.
I used to club like a mad fucking beast until my
Yeah.
body decided, hey, you know what, stupid, you're old.
Oh, it happens to us
And, then,
all.
and the DJs would try to kill me on a weekly basis. But yeah, and let's see, I've been sexually active since I was 15-ish, I think.
Mhm.
I've been married, since divorced, several relationships. I identify as queer. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell, basically. But so let me see here. Where was I going to start? Oh yeah. So, a couple things. Just as a piece of general information, in the United States, and I don't know what the statistic is for the world, but in the United States, there are 1 in 4 adults who live with a disability or multiple disabilities of some fashion, some description. And things like sex ed for people with disabilities, both, teenage, adolescents and adults, is woefully not talked about. It's really bad.
Mhm.
Um, it also fosters a lot of misconceptions and barriers surrounding sex and disability. Um, but I mean, all in all, there's a couple of what to my mind seem like rudimentary ideas that are the biggest things that we should understand. A, people with disabilities, we're just like the rest of you when it comes to sex. All right. We're not asexual, or at least most of us are not asexual, nor are we hypersexual with uncontrollable urges. Um, but when we limit sex education for people with disabilities, all that does is minimize potential for self-exploration, sexual well-being,
Yeah.
and good mental health. Because I mean, let's be honest, you know, sex can be great for your mental health
And your physical health.
and
There have
physical
been studies that have proven that orgasms, I mean, we get wound up throughout the course of the day,
health.
and that release just kinda it allows us to let go of all the tension and frustration that we have.
Right? I mean, it releases oxytocin,
Mhm.
serotonin, dopamine, all of the
Lots of
feel good brain
necessary
chemicals,
things.
you know, the brain's morphine, as it were.
Mhm.
I mean, then there are other things like, okay, so here's where we get into a little bit of a heavy topic. I know, right off the bat, right?
Mhm.
A lack of sexual education for people with disabilities can lead to them dealing with things like reproductive rights being denied.
Oof.
Okay. In fact, there's a piece of data that in the US between 1907 and 1957, that's 50 years. In that 50-year time span, about 60,000 people with disabilities were forcibly sterilized, some of them even without their knowledge.
Yeah.
And it only really kind of didn't immediately stop, but it petered off after the US found out about the eugenics um, initiatives that the Nazis took during World War II.
Mhm.
And it's things like that when I learned about these things many years ago, it infuriated me.
What's even more infuriating is that Hitler drew the eugenics shit from America.
Yeah, yeah,
It originated here.
it did, which is abhorrent. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. There are also, many marginalized women who were and have been and are still sterilized without their
Hmm.
consent today.
Hmm. And not just women with disabilities.
Yeah.
You know, it,
Yeah.
it's it's bad.
Yeah.
You know, and
Well,
this
the
is the kind of thing.
eugenics tends to want to get rid of anybody that is not what they deem fully functional, i.e., they can't be exploited for their labor.
Right,
They can be exploited in other ways, you
and
know,
and people
and
do
they
get
are.
exploited. Yeah, which actually leads into something else that another bit of a heavy topic. Just some facts about stigma and issues that the disabled population face. Out of the disabled population, 21% of disabled adults, meaning over 15 years old, have experienced at least one instance of sexual violence. You want to guess what the average percentage of non disabled adults is?
Oof.
10%. 10%.
Yeah.
So twice the amount of the number of people with disabilities have experienced sexual assault, sexual violence than people without disabilities, which is insane.
It's
It
appalling.
it is appalling.
Yeah. The society that we live in really, it seems to cater to those who abuse. I mean, you look at the experiences you had in high school. If you were bullied and you let anybody know, who was punished? You were,
Clearly, we were, yeah.
every single time.
Oh, and actually, really quick side note, going to Michelle's comment about not seeing disabled people in sex ed, that's not that uncommon,
Yeah.
unfortunately. When those of us who are now in our 30s, 40s, 50s, what have you, were in school and learning about sex ed, a lot of people with disabilities were excluded because it was still thought of that disabled people, A, either can't have sex, or B, don't experience sexual desire.
hmm
It's
Well, I mean,
ridiculous.
100 years ago, people like us were being locked up.
Yeah,
And anybody neurodivergent was literally locked away from society, you
yeah.
know,
Neurodivergence, disability of any kind,
disability.
really.
Oh, yeah. Anything aside from the normative. I think I seem to remember they had ugly laws as well. If people weren't attractive, you weren't allowed out in public because
Mhm.
it was not good.
Yeah. Hey, Authenticato, welcome in. Yeah, just the overwhelming level of bullshittery that was pulled on people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And we have a pixie too. Yay. All the cool people here tonight.
Sweet. Feel like I should turn the disco light on.
Right?
Mhm.
So I mean, but yes, getting back to that, and it wasn't even until I believe 2006 that um, the United Nations, I believe it's called the Coalition for People with Disability, or Persons with Disabilities, basically voted to include things like sexual education for people with disabilities
Mhm.
and to guard the rights of people with disabilities to express themselves sexually.
Yeah. Yeah.
2006. I mean, think about it, it's 18 years ago.
Well, and the really frustrating thing is that the only other option you have for knowledge is on the fringe, because that's where a lot of people who are not normative get relegated.
Yeah,
We aren't taught about authenticity. We aren't taught about living within a healthy mental and physical environment, and that
right.
does
We're
not
not.
help either.
We're not. I mean, even as a whole, we're not taught about those things, let alone if you're a person with disability. I mean, come on. You
Yeah.
need to be given the opportunity to A, express yourself, B, guard your mental, physical, and emotional well being and sexual
Oof.
well being,
Yeah.
and C, you need people need to respect that, there are disabled people who are sexual beings. I'm one of them, you
Well,
know?
I don't really understand. I mean, to kind of slide away, but it also ties in. Everybody talks about, ew, my parents have sex. I'm like, we need to stop getting grossed out about physical intimacy.
Right?
It is a gift to everybody who engages in it. It is a healthy activity. Hopefully you're with somebody who's not abusive, who's going to be supportive, who ensures that you enjoy yourself as much as they do. It looks like Authenticate came with a Wikipedia entry from
Yep.
1967 to 1974. Various cities of the United States had unsightly beggar ordinances, retroactively named ugly laws. These laws targeted poor people and disabled people. For instance, In San Francisco, a law of 1867 deemed it illegal for any person who is diseased, maimed, mutilated, or deformed in any way so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object to expose himself or herself to public view. Exceptions to public exposure were acceptable only if the people were subjects of demonstration to illustrate the separation of disabled from non-disabled and their need for reformation. Just
Right.
oof,
Because, it's totally clear that we disabled people need reformation.
right? Like, oh, they do so much better when they're hidden away from view,
Right.
when they're
Let's
isolated.
let's institutionalize them for shit they can't control.
Oof, I feel that. It's a punishment for daring to step outside the normative, and it's like, how the fuck can I not if I don't have the same physical mobility that the other
Mhm.
people around me do, or
Right.
if I have what I kind of want to call a visual impairment that causes other people to behave in really unpleasant reactive ways.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, and to Pixie's point, yeah, I mean, bravo to you, to your nan, Pixie, for encouraging you to learn more about your own body.
Yeah.
Bravo, bravo to Pixie's nan.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. May she be living her best afterlife.
Right? Best afterlife. I like that.
I know my mom is watching like Pavarotti constantly with a martini in her hand.
Mm. Hey,
Mhm.
that's the
Mhm.
way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just starting to like recently when I started getting into the somatic sex work, I started seeing more and more sex toys that were specifically for people with disabilities, and they're a little easier to manipulate,
Hmm.
and there's special furniture. I mean, it's wonderful that somebody is considering this and making it happen.
Oh yeah. I mean, some of the stuff out there, the resources out there, well, physical resources like the accessible sex toys, the accessible sex furniture, cushions, all sorts of aids, you name it. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. It really is just wild that people still don't know that these things exist.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
I
And
mean,
I'm glad I'm really glad that you decided to talk to me about this today because
of
it's
course, of
something that needs to
course.
be talked about. And you're an awesome fucking stellar dude.
Ah, psh, flattery will get you everywhere.
Yay.
But interesting that you bring up things like sex toys, because those can also be used to help with any kind of sexual dysfunction
Mhm.
that some people with disabilities experience. Now, that being said, that sort of sexual dysfunction or those sorts of sexual dysfunction are really oftentimes assumed to be resulting or a result of an individual's disability,
Mhm.
right? But unfortunately, what that assumption does, is it discourages a lot of people with disabilities from doing things like seeking support or receiving effective treatment or advocating for self when they're talking to their doctor or
Mm.
any medical professional,
Yeah.
you know? And it wasn't until I was probably, I want to say 18, 19 years old that I really started to learn to open up to my own medical professionals,
Mm.
the team of doctors that I see.
Yeah.
Oh, and Authenticata, yes, you are correct. A lot of these should also come with all the sex toys need handles because it would help immensely for people with dexterity issues or hand and arm spasticity, things of
See,
that.
now my mind is thinking about having an kind of an attachment that would clip to the side of a wheelchair, but I would imagine that hip and leg mobility is low in a wheelchair, so that's maybe not helpful. But if you had some sort of device that would somehow clip so you could rest it in a certain position and kind of move against it.
I could see that being a thing. Yeah.
I remember seeing a pillow. I don't remember the link, but it's a pillow with a component, I think, where you can put a vibrating attachment into the pillow and then you can just hug the pillow,
Hmm.
you know? But I think there are more people with disabilities out there who are kind of changing the sex toy industry, which is fantastic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The leaps and bounds that are being made is it's brilliant to watch. It's
Yeah.
brilliant to watch. You know, I really, really enjoy, the fact that people are actually thinking about these things and making new things and actually making these things happen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's a beautiful movement.
it really, really is. But
Yeah, there's a site called OMG Yes that
mm,
is a literal dictionary or encyclopedia full of sexual experiences from women about their masturbation habits and that sort of thing. And it's really waking a lot of people up to, oh my God, I didn't even consider that. And that's the goal of secrets. That's the goal of shame, is to make sure that we don't talk about these sort of things, share ideas, and make our lives better.
right. I mean, who doesn't want an improvement in their own quality of life?
Right?
It's
Right?
it's yeah. And then, I mean, getting back to like the sex ed issue though too as well.
Yeah.
There's an organization called SECAS. It's Sex Ed for Social Change, and they have a a PDF that they've put out that basically has a comprehensive guide to including people with disabilities and the notion of disabilities into sex ed. And if you read this thing, it's absolutely brilliant.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think, Jada, you said that you're going to put links to these things in the YouTube description, correct?
Yeah, the links that you've given me and the links that I found, there's going to be a whole list
Awesome.
attached to the YouTube video.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and that's one of the things that we really need to be focusing on going forward. Not just educators, but parents and, the people actually learning about these things,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because it not focusing on these things and not including people with disabilities, all it does is serve to disempower people.
And that is what a certain contingent of society within this country wants, unfortunately.
It is. It is. And again, it's infuriating that
Yeah.
there is that contingent of society who really couldn't care less about anybody who's not like them.
Yeah. And anybody who is like them, they want to control literally everything about it.
Indeed. Indeed. And that's where things like infantilization of people with
Mm,
disabilities gets pushed into the light, so to speak.
yeah.
We get people like support networks or even people's own guardians. We get treated by these people like perpetual children.
Hmm.
you know I even had a surgeon up until 2010 who treated me like a child until I basically lost it in her office and screamed at her for 20 minutes.
Yeah. It's like I'm a grown fucking human being. Treat me as such.
Right.
It should not be that hard.
Yeah. And when we avoid these kinds of discussions about sex and relationships, it leaves people with disabilities and many others vulnerable
Very
to
much
things
so.
like sexual assault or unhealthy relationships or severe mental health issues like depression,
Hmm.
drug use, alcohol abuse,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
all sorts of
addiction is reaction to trauma that can't be overcome without
yes,
the help of community,
yes, very
and
true.
yeah.
And it's insidious what things like that do to people with disabilities,
Yeah.
and really anyone who suffers with it, lives with it.
Well, I mean, I think the abled, as I guess as a mostly able-bodied person, I don't always think about what life would be like if I couldn't walk everywhere,
Yeah.
or I couldn't drive myself anywhere, or I couldn't get out of my bed and use the bathroom by myself. And there is an entire contingent of people for whom that is an everyday reality. There
Mhm.
has to be somebody to assist,
Yeah.
for the course of their life. And the thing that I don't understand is instead of providing the resources that these people need, people nitpick about, well, eh, about their existence,
Indeed.
and
Indeed.
that's wretched.
Yeah. But I mean, and then there's also people like me who have developed a skill for smartassery, shall we say, when fielding these kinds of issues. In fact, two very specific anecdotes. When I was married, uh, my ex-wife was
Hmm,
talking to her grandmother at one point, and her grandmother was talking to one of her church friends, and my ex-wife was an abled woman,
mhm.
and I am not an abled man, right? So the church friend turns to my grandmother-in-law and she says, they've been married for how long? And at this point, it was like 3 years. And the woman says to my grandmother-in-law, "Well, do they have sex?" And my grandmother-in-law, you have to picture, was this very, you know, prim, proper Southern U.S. Black woman with a very heavy Georgia accent,
Mm.
turns to this woman, looks her dead in the face, and says, "Well, I don't think she'd be with him if they weren't." And I lost it. It was all I could do to not fall over laughing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I know, right? Authenticata, me, a smartass, heaven forfend.
Right? Yeah. It's so unlike you.
I know, right? And what was the other one that I was thinking of? Um, oh,
Hmm.
is just things with ex-partners of mine and my ex-wife. You know, I I would, be talking to someone who I had either just met or, I was in a circle of people that I had already known. And the topic of, my sex life would come up because people are morbidly curious for some fucking reason.
It's like all the
Right.
people that are curious about the kind of genitalia that everybody seems to have.
I know, right? And we- I actually got the question once. I mean, I've gotten it frequently, but I get this one particular time someone asked, "Well, how do you have sex?" And without thinking, I just blurted out, "As frequently as possible and usually in a bed."
Well spoken.
I mean, and then I realized what I had said, and I realized I was in mixed company, and this person I had basically just met, and I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
probably shouldn't have gone there with somebody new," but
Oh my god. That's
it is what it is.
fantastic.
But
What
yeah, and
are
then
without getting into too vivid an explanation, what would you say some of the things that you've kind of butted up against as issues?
I mean, myself personally, it can be very difficult to get a potential partner past that barrier, or someone that I'm interested in past the barrier of, hey, this person's in a wheelchair, this person
Mhm.
has a disability, and try to make them aware that yes, I still have sex, and yes, I am still a sexual being and a romantic being, and
Yeah.
it it uh, it can be infuriating sometimes, the level of ignorance, whether willful or not, that we encounter on a daily basis. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's the biggest one for me. Um, I mean, there's things that friends of mine have dealt with as well. Um, I've a couple of friends with varying levels of disabilities, varying severities, who've dealt with the sexual dysfunction thing. They've dealt with unhealthy relationships because they were never taught how to sexually or romantically engage with someone, you know, and it again, it leads to unhealthy issues with a lot of people.
I think a large part of the problem is that most sex education in this country that is paid for with tax dollars is insert tab A into slot B, repeat.
Right.
There's no explanation of all of the varying erogenous zones around the body. There's no explanation of the kind of the way that your body accommodates if there is an issue in the area where you usually receive most of your pleasure if you're able-bodied,
So
how that will shift.
there's actually a term for that as far as the male body. I'm not sure if it's the inverse term for the female body, but
Yeah.
there is a phenomenon where if a person has impaired sensation in, say, their genitalia,
Mhm.
right, the brain actually redirects pleasure centers to another portion of the body. And I know a guy who he was a like a T6 quadriplegic, or tetraplegic as we call them.
Mhm.
Basically was paralyzed from about mid chest down.
Okay.
And because he could no longer feel his genitalia or get an erection, his
Mhm.
body basically rerouted things to where his center of pleasure that would have been his penis was
Mhm.
now his thumb.
That's
And it's
awesome.
actually called a surrogate penis.
It is fascinating what
Yeah,
biology in the brain does.
the body is a weird, weird
Yeah, it
thing.
is.
It's
Yeah, it
fascinating.
is.
But yeah, it's actually called a surrogate penis.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
and it happens a lot with people who have neurological disorders or neurological disabilities or
Mhm.
spinal cord injury, things of that nature. Anything that would affect levels of sensation.
I think I have also heard of similar things happening to women been who have had clitorectomies,
Hmm.
where the body kind of reroutes it, but it's monstrous to me that we still do that. It's also monstrous to me that we still do circumcision
Yeah.
because nobody tells you about the botched circumcisions
No, of course not.
where if somebody ends up getting erect, it's painful because the skin is too tight and pulls. It creates a whole different problem.
Yeah, it creates hosts of issues, you know, and
Mhm.
it, to my mind, things like circumcision really should be something that's talked about with a person once they reach a level of sexual maturity.
Agreed.
You know,
But I think they do it to kids because who would choose to have that done when they're grown?
that's a fair point. I mean,
And I understand that there is a religious component to it,
yeah, I mean that's how it started.
but and there's a lot of countries that do it because they say that that particular area is I guess prone to dirt and filth. I guess these are countries where people don't wash their dicks. No, but it's just yeah.
I mean, it's a barbaric practice. Let's be honest.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
Yeah.
is. And
Oh, you know what, Pixie? That's a really I like that anecdote. Just the fact that you of all people, I mean, I can see standing up to a teacher and going, "No, you're fucking wrong." So, and same with you, Authenticata.
yeah, it is immensely distressing how much medical science does not know about the female body.
Or I mean, I don't know that it's does not know, but willfully chooses to ignore.
Oh, very much so. I
You
mean,
know,
for generations and still now, uh, medicine is practiced predominantly on able-bodied men, and it's usually able-bodied white men, and
mm-hmm.
that's where all medicine is based.
In fact, I was having a conversation with SJ of all people, maybe a week or so ago, about advocating for self with medical providers.
Mhm.
A, as people with disabilities, and B, as a woman herself, because it's abhorrent that women are not listened to enough by medical professionals.
Not at all.
It's ridiculous, and it's even worse when that woman has a disability or any level of disability,
Mhm.
because again it goes back to that infantilization of people with disabilities. We clearly don't know our own bodies. We clearly don't know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, nobody my direct experience doesn't count because the person I'm talking to has never shared that experience. That makes me
Right.
nuts.
Right. I mean, there's a level of, again, willful ignorance in the medical field,
Yeah.
not just towards people with disabilities, but women as well, and it's awful.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, things are getting better slowly but surely.
Things are
That's
slowly
why,
changing.
yeah, I mean, that's why, I'm glad that organizations like Seekus exist, and like there's one called Better Health Australia, which specifically um, came out of a World Health Organization meeting.
Nice.
Um, and one of the things that they are famous for espousing is that sexuality is a basic need and aspect of being human that cannot be separated from other aspects of life.
Yes.
Right. And that is also true for people with disabilities. You know, we deserve to have the same sexual rights as anyone else.
Yes. 1000%.
There's even an organization that's specifically for disabled women, which I found incredible and fascinating when I got to reading over these things. It's actually sexualityanddisability.org.
I think that's one of the links you sent me.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Basically, it's the whole page is set up as a list of questions or a bunch of questions that any woman with a disability might have. Things like questions about their bodies, about the mechanics or dynamics of having sex as a person with a disability, the complexities of intimate relationships, having kids, um, not not being able to voice fears or experiences of encountering any kinds of sexual abuse or abuse of any kind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating resource for women.
Fantastic.
You
And
know,
that'll definitely be included with the YouTube video.
yes, yes. I don't know how you are about posting links here in the chat.
Oh, I mean, if you wanna post links, go for it.
Tell you what,
I don't think the chat is saved. That's the only
that's
issue,
okay.
but that way for people that are here, they can follow those links.
Oops, I can type. Really, I can.
I type good.
I type words good.
Mm.
Yeah.
What is the who is the maker of the bourbon that you are?
Oh, this is Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. It is
Interesting.
a rather recent favorite.
Okay.
It's because Bottled in Bond is a very it's a set of strict guidelines with
Hmm.
when producing alcohol.
Okay.
I believe it was started in the 1800s, but
Okay.
it's super smoky bourbon. I love it, and it goes great with tonic water.
Okay.
Very very nice. Oh, and where was I? Oh. I know what I was going to mention because we were talking specifically about sex ed. I came across a rather distressing statistic. There are in the United States, which is, as many people know, and some people across the pond might not be completely aware of, is made up of 50 states. Out of those 50 states, there are five, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that mandate inclusive sex ed for people with disabilities. Five.
What are those states?
I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Yeah.
But
How
out
are
of
they
those,
doing in those states at actually like meeting those
I mean,
those
it's
rules?
mandated. It's mandated for the inclusivity. Well, the
Yeah.
inclusivity is mandated. However, the sex ed program as a whole it is only required or mandated in 3 of those 5.
Hmm.
2 of them are optional.
Wow.
Out of the 50 states in the country, 36 states do not mention the sex education for any kind of special needs at all. At all.
That's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
It
And
really is.
unfortunately, what that does, or one of the things that does, is it leaves it up to the person with disability to learn from either parents or, heaven forfend, fucking media,
Mm.
things like porn, to learn about their own sexuality, and that ends up being either incomplete, inaccurate, or completely absent.
Yeah.
You know, and don't get me wrong, porn is great.
Hmm.
I like porn. You know,
I'm a fan myself.
but it's not, or rather, it shouldn't be a teaching tool.
Not at all.
You know,
It is meant to stimulate. It's not meant to educate.
indeed.
And unfortunately, because the kind of porn that is out there is so prevalent, there are people who end up needing more and more weirdness
Hmm.
in their porn, like violence.
Yeah, people tend to escalate their turn-ons as they become basically resistant to the other types of porn that they started with.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And Pixie said, let us not even think about the dumpster fire that is disability fetishizing porn.
Oh my God! Thank you for mentioning that, Pixie, because I was going to try to find a way to segue into that, but you did it for me. So thank you. So there is a specific term for those who fetishize the disabled population, and for those who don't know, that term is devoteeism.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, I say recently, it was a couple of months ago, actually had to update my FetLife profile um, to basically state unequivocally that I'm not into devotees.
Yeah.
Specifically, I mentioned that I will not be fetishized for something that is out of my control.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. Because I would get message after message after message from these devotees.
If they came with money, maybe that would help. But
Yeah, I could use a sugar daddy or a sugar mama.
right. But then there's like there's a part of your psyche that affects negatively, I would imagine.
It does, yes.
And would
Not
I mean, is there any amount of money that would make it worth it? I guess, you know?
if you had asked me that question, say 20 years ago, I probably would have said no.
Hmm.
Um, but ever since my divorce, I have learned to, you know, accept a lot of things about myself and try to empower myself a lot better.
Yeah.
So I've become a lot more, these are my boundaries. Thou shalt not cross my boundary. If you do, get the fuck out.
Fuck yeah.
And that is another thing that where we talked about unhealthy relationships. A lot of people with disabilities, when it comes to things like sex or intimate relationships of any kind, have difficulty understanding their own boundaries and setting those and enforcing them.
Oof.
You know?
Boundaries are something that predatory people punish you for.
Oh yeah,
And
100%.
so it's, I mean, it's we're taught, especially those of us who come from codependent relationships.
Hmm.
We're very fawning, we're very people pleasing.
Yes.
And so it can be really hard to learn that you get to set boundaries,
Yeah.
you know, especially because other people give you shit about it.
Yeah. I mean, it took
You
me
they
a
don't
long time to learn that.
yeah, you're no longer a usable resource to them, and
Hmm.
that's what upsets them.
Hmm. Yeah. And there were in between, I would say, my late teens and up until the time I got divorced,
Mhm.
um, there were a lot of unhealthy relationships due to my lack of enforcing my own boundaries, especially
Oof.
when it came to things like sex.
Well, I mean, the 1980s was a fucking dumpster fire. I mean, everybody
Mhm.
was abusive, everybody was awful. We didn't understand about boundaries. We didn't understand about, advocating for ourselves sexually. It was very much, "Hey, at least I'm getting it. I
Right.
should be grateful."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the, in fact, it's interesting that you chose that phrasing because those are things that have actually been said to me almost verbatim.
Oof. Yeah, that is not surprising. There are a lot of people out there, and I don't wanna throw around the narcissist word, but there are people whose kinda default is, predating on the people around them who are easily manipulated,
Yeah.
and that is a trigger phrase that will get them what they want until people realize that it's a trigger phrase, and that's why they use it.
Hmm. Yeah, but that on the part of the person with a disability who is being predated on
Yeah.
or preyed on rather, it that takes a lot of introspection, and it's important to take that introspection and really sit with it
Oh,
when you
yeah.
can, because it's it ends up being extraordinarily helpful once you can learn these things about yourself and learn how to enforce these boundaries, whether they be romantic, sexual, professional, what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the more that you do the work to learn yourself, to learn who you are and
Mhm.
where you wanna stand in this life and what you wanna stand for, the easier it is to avoid people who prey on others
Yeah,
because your confidence it's gonna keep you safe.
more than people might realize. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
there are predators out there who prey on the non-confident
Oh, yes.
specifically, not
Oh,
just
yeah.
because they're easier to manipulate, but because they don't stand up for themselves, or they don't know how to stand up for themselves.
Yeah. Broken people are really easy to spot. and they
You know
are
what?
even
I'm
easier to I don't like the word broken
I was
people, but
just gonna mention that, yeah.
that is very much the way that these people and people that look for broken people, like the CIA,
Mm,
you look for somebody that is easily manipulated and that won't kick back too much,
indeed, indeed.
and that's just a lot of young men are taught that that's how you have a relationship. I mean, it's if you look at the whole pickup industry, it's all about
Ugh.
you love bomb and then you bring it back, you throw some insults in there, and the whole goal is to disorient someone.
Or what do they call that now? Negging or something like that?
Negging, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I would imagine that disabled people end up having to deal with that a
Yeah,
great deal more than
yeah.
abled people.
That's actually what's kind of funny that you mentioned the negging thing is and in basically being used as a manipulation tool.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the ways that I came up with my Twitch moniker, One True Cripple. Um, I I do the self-deprecating humor thing before someone else can do it as a way of disarming people
Yeah.
from basically showing them, hey, you can't insult me when it comes to my disability because I do it to myself for
Yeah.
comedy. I used to be fond of saying, I am the one true cripple, thou shalt not have cripples before me.
That's fantastic.
And generally, if I meet someone and it's in like a club setting or a very social setting, I'll say, hey, I'm Doug, or you could just yell, hey, cripple. Um, and I've found over my decades on this planet that those who laugh, like genuinely laugh, I'm
Mhm.
probably going to get along with quite well. If you're
Mhm.
horrified by this statement, we're probably not going to get along because you're not going to understand my humor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do a lot of self-deprecating humor, and not just humor at my own expense, but humor that revolves around my being a person with a disability. Like
Mhm.
once I had gotten to know a potential partner. This was back in my club days. One of the things that I would say is, "Hey, I'm Doug. I'm the best seat in the house."
And you
Because
are.
permanent lap, you know.
Yep, exactly.
And the scary thing,
Mhm.
worked a lot more than you might think.
That's spectacular. Well, I tend to think that the people that were in our social group were mostly neurodivergent. I don't think we had a lot of neurotypicals in the goth or punk scene.
No, no, not at all. And Authenticata, I'm glad I could make you laugh with that one. Right. This is why we're friends, because I'm a sarcastic asshole,
Mhm.
and I make fun of myself because it's great comedy.
Yeah.
And I've
As
come to
long as you
grips.
don't internalize it,
No, I've come to grips with the things
then you're
about
good to go.
myself that are disability related.
Yeah.
Oh, Queensberry, thank you, Michelle. I've come to grips with the things about myself that are disability related, and I am constantly on the lookout for new ways to make that into comedy
Yeah.
because it's fucking funny.
Yeah.
When you really think about it, it's funny. And especially when it comes to sex with disability, it can be really, really funny. For example, and here is a frank anecdote for anyone who might be a little squeaky about the whole thing.
Mhm.
When I was married, my ex-wife and I used to have this bed that sat. It was a queen size bed that sat relatively high off the ground, right? So we're doing the deed, and I have my arm wrapped around her back, one arm wrapped around her back, and I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, and I fucking dropped her.
Oh,
I dropped her on the floor,
oh no.
right? Once I realized, I freaked out because I thought I'd hurt her.
Mhm.
Once I realized that she was okay, we both lost it.
Oh yeah.
And the
That's a
reason
moment.
and the reason I dropped her is because I had a back spasm, which I frequently get because I'm
Mhm.
sitting down literally 16, 17 hours a day,
Mhm.
right? So my back stays in one position. And when that happens, your back muscles tense up and you get, what they call tremors, or you get cramps. And I got a cramp right in the middle
Mhm.
of that in my back, and I fucking dropped her. And I
Shit.
was for like 2 seconds, I was mortified,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Uh,
yes, SJ, this is how you get daddy cripple. So in this specific group of people who are now in your lovely Twitch chat, Jada, um, it was the fault of SJ and like one other person who, once I started growing the beard out, they nicknamed me Daddy because I'm one of the oldest people in the group.
Mhm.
B, I've got all of this going on here, and I used to have it, full, so there was much, much more gray.
Yeah.
Yes, authenticata degenerates, the lot of you,
Oh, indeed.
degenerates,
Oh, indeed.
but you're the best kind of degenerates. So yes, and that's how I identify in a specific part of a Discord that a bunch of us frequent. So
That's
thank you for
brilliant.
that, SJ. Made me tell that story.
Oh man.
Apparently, I exude daddy energy.
Oh, you do. You do.
Please, okay, I'll take your word for it.
And yet he
No, no,
doesn't
no.
like brats. Hmm.
Authenticata. It's not that I don't like brats. I like brats. I like because brats are people too. I like
True.
brats, but you know what? Brats. I'm a brat tamer, so deal with
There you go.
it. I mean, there is the I don't know what they call it, the BDSM quiz
Mm.
that tells you all that stuff, and so a bunch of us have shared it with each other,
Mhm.
consensually, of course. Oh my god! Okay, getting away from that really quickly because this just popped into my head.
Okay.
Um, Another thing that can happen with the infantilization of people with disabilities is that they never learn how to give, receive, or respect consent.
Ooh.
Um,
Yeah.
that has happened to me and
Oof.
to several people I know. Um, it it's disgusting when someone doesn't respect consent,
Yeah.
and it's even more disgusting to my mind. Excuse me, when you don't respect consent, the consent of a person with a disability, based on the fact that you believe yourself to be able to either A, outsmart, or B, overpower them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's and it's one of that's actually one of the reasons that I started learning martial arts when I was, a teenager.
Yeah.
It's because I was sick of being pushed around, and I was sick of having my consent, both, sexually and socially, just violated.
Yeah. It's the way that people navigate, the people who will push someone else's wheelchair. It's like, that's a fucking stranger. What's your problem?
Oh my God. Oh my God. For the abled viewing audience here, please, for the love of everything you hold sacred, do not, and I repeat, do not touch a wheelchairian's wheelchair without permission. A
Mhm.
lot of us consider it an extension of our own body, and you
Mhm.
wouldn't want someone putting their hands on your body without your permission, right? Right.
Yeah.
Don't
It's like
fucking do it.
it's like literally taking an able-bodied person and moving them out of the way.
Yes. I
Most of the
liken it,
most of the people in the world consider that to be rude as fuck.
yeah. I mean,
It's the
I liken
same
it to
with
things
somebody in a
like
wheelchair.
I liken it to like picking up a short person and carrying them without their permission.
Ooh, yeah.
Fuck
Mm.
that. And Pixie, by the way, Oh my God, yes, Pixie. The I'm your carer. I know better. No, no, you fucking don't.
Yeah,
Because
your
guess
job
whose
is to
body it is?
assist me.
Mine. It's my
Mhm.
body. I've lived with it for
Exactly.
47 years. Fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I
There's
mean,
a
you alluded to earlier, Jada, about the medical professionals. Your degree does not trump my life experience within my own skin.
Ajay.
End of story.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe with like diagnosis
Mhm.
after copious testing. But other than that, you don't get to tell me that I'm not in pain or that my discomfort is all in my head or my sexual dysfunction is all in my head. No, you don't get to tell me that
Yeah.
just by a 30-minute conversation. Shut up.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's ridiculous.
Oh, and, I literally got yelled at 2 days ago for using the disabled toilet because my walking stick obviously wasn't proof enough that I was struggling enough to need the accessibility bars. Oof. Fuck, I'm so
What
sorry,
the fuck,
Pixie.
Pixie?
That's fucking
See,
awful.
20 years ago, Pixie, were I you, I would have beat someone with the cane. That's just me. But then again, I used to be a not nice young man.
We
I
all had a lot of rage when we were younger.
Yeah, and that actually, that's another thing with, being a person with a disability. A lot of us are prone to bottling emotions because we're not taught how to express them in a healthy and safe way.
Yeah. And in some ways, it's very much seen and not heard,
Oh yeah,
like kids.
yeah. Which again alludes or goes back to the infantilization bit.
Mhm.
We are, and a lot of times we're not even supposed to be seen because people will ignore us because looking at a person with in a wheelchair or a person with any kind of malformation or a person who uses a cane because they're visually impaired, it's uncomfortable. And we don't need to be out in public. Fuck you.
Mhm.
you know it's craziness. And that's when I make it a point to make eye contact with a person, and I'll smile or wave or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Especially, and here's the other thing, if it's a child and a
Mm.
child smiles at you,
Mm.
you better well smile back and wave. And
Mhm.
then the parent is like, it's so rude to stare. Or if a child comes up, what happened to your legs? And the parent goes, oh, you shouldn't ask things like that. Shut the fuck up and let your kid ask questions
Yeah.
because it's a sign of intelligence. It's a sign
Mhm.
of curiosity,
Mhm.
you know?
Oh, yeah. And it's a chance to teach. It's a chance to teach and a chance to learn, like
Right?
every conversation is.
Yeah, let your kid learn about the world around them. And if you let them meet people with disabilities and learn about them and engage them in conversation, it will make their socialization easier as they grow older.
Oh, yeah. Instead of, "Oh, no, that's a secret, we don't talk about that."
Right. Or it's rude to ask those kinds of questions, which is
Yeah.
total horse shit.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, hang on one second. Let's see. Queensberry, I had a customer throw the I'm disabled line at me at work today, all because we were hectic busy and there wasn't a small trolley right in front of the front door for her. I nearly lost my shit and just said, so am I, but I'll go and get a trolley for you. Then got a complaint put against me for my attitude. Mm.
Yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, the that kind of reaction from a person with disability, Michelle, is it falls into a trope about people with disabilities that is widely abused in media, for example. And it's the trope of the bitter individual. Um, it people with disabilities who haven't come to grips with their own disabilities or haven't learned how to circumnavigate certain restrictions that they might have can become very angry or bitter, and unfortunately take that out on the world around them.
Yeah.
And the people around them. I say this because I used to be one of those people. When I was a teenager, I was a very, very angry young man. I was a violent young man, which is actually why I am now a pacifist. And it took a lot of introspection and, frankly, a lot of therapy and a lot of, soul searching, for lack of a better term, to understand why I was the way I was. And it was because as a child, I felt like I was not heard by those that meant the most to me. Um, especially when it came to things like my psychological and physical well-being. It's ridiculous how often that happens, where we as people with disabilities are not listened to or not heard by those we trust. And a lot of that is when we have to have frank conversations about things like our own sexuality. For example, when I came out as bisexual in my teens, I was probably 17, 18-ish. My mother, or I call her now my maternal unit because we haven't spoken in 10 years, literally said to me, "Oh, you're just confused." And I looked her dead in the face. I was like, no, you've met my boyfriend. It's like, no, I haven't. Yes, you have. You just didn't realize it at the time.
Oh my God.
And it was ridiculous how little I was allowed to express that side of me around my maternal unit. Like my brother and my sister, my siblings, they're all for it. They're like, great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm the oldest of three, and my siblings are awesome when it comes to meeting my partners, male or female or otherwise.
Yeah. I still don't understand the stigma.
I don't either. Frankly,
it's like, why does it matter who I decide to have naked fun time with? Why does that matter?
Or as another streamer, actually the streamer to whom I originally gave this talk, he calls it, what does he call it? The rumpy, bumpy, bumping uglies. And that always tickled the hell out of me. But yeah, I mean, when we're not allowed to express ourselves, whether socially or intellectually or psychologically or sexually, it stunts our ability to interact with the world around us.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
It cuts off an avenue of connecting.
It does. It really does. Thank you, Authenticator. Rumpy, pumpy, bumping uglies. That one. Yes. Do you mind me mentioning that streamer's name, Jada?
Oh, not at all.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I originally gave this talk to a streamer who goes by Valen Vane, who is a amazing individual. He's a sex educator who lives in the UK and has a Twitch channel and a YouTube channel all about, hedonism and being a sex educator. And he's just a fantastic individual. If you haven't checked him out, please go do so.
Yeah, I'll also put the link for the conversation that you had with Valentine
I did
in the
send
YouTube
you that,
video as well.
I did send you that.
Because there's probably going to be stuff that was covered there that wasn't covered here and vice versa.
So my talk that I gave him was a lot more lighthearted because of the audience that I know he has. Is a lot of us are neurodivergent, and a lot of us have experienced a shitload of trauma in our lives. So I didn't want to go to the same level that I'm speaking to you about now. because I didn't want for people to not be able to watch the stream and the VOD basically.
Yeah.
But we had our conversation, and it was great fun, and everybody learned a lot. Oh, good night, Queen. Good night, Michelle.
Good night, Michelle.
Go get you
Thanks
some
for joining
sleep.
us.
Thanks for coming in.
Authenticate Orkata had posted, or I'm so new to this internet thing, and I'm so high.
The one
I had a
about the
medical appointment in an unfamiliar place, and I've got mobility issues. I use a cane sometimes. I wasn't sure how much walking there would be, so I asked for a wheelchair. But because I'm big, it needed a bariatric chair, and discovered those chairs are not operable by the user. I couldn't wheel myself, and I had to have someone push me. It really gave me an insight.
Yeah, and the same thing is true when those of us who are wheelchair users get on an airplane. What they call aisle chairs
Mhm.
have to be operated by another person because A, they're more narrow. B, they only have the small wheels, the 4 small wheels on the ground. And yeah, it does take away from the independence of the wheelchair user.
Yeah. And I don't remember when this happened, but there's an article about an airline that I guess they destroyed this guy's wheelchair, which happens a ridiculous amount of time. And that's
It is abhorrent how
Oh, yeah.
often this happens
Oh, yeah.
because the chairs are not treated with the respect that they deserve. And
Mhm.
there are, I want to say, 3 major airlines at least in the US, that are infamous for this. There's Southwest, United, and I want to say Alaska, but I'm not entirely certain of that third one.
Yeah.
But Southwest used to be completely awful with it. Until I would say maybe a year ago, they started really addressing it.
Mhm.
They've gotten better with it, but
That's good to hear.
it still happens a ridiculous amount.
Well, Kata, was the Canadian story, did the guy have to literally crawl through the aisle to deplane? I
Yes.
can't even imagine how completely humiliating that must have been. And just disheartening, and I can't imagine, and it's infuriating.
Yeah.
That people think it's okay that happened.
And the fact that it happens as often as it does,
Yeah.
again, shows that we as people with disabilities, are not to be paid mind.
Well, and they don't bring you guys in the room when they're talking
No, of course not.
accessibility. It's always a bunch of
Because
able-bodied people talking about the kind of disability that's needed instead of actually bringing people with disabilities into the conversation.
right. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of people with disabilities becoming accessibility consultants, which is actually funny because I was approached by an old friend maybe a year ago-ish
Mhm.
to provide accessibility consultation on a tabletop RPG that he and his wife
Dude.
had developed. So I am now formally mentioned in their credits, which is awesome. As an
That's
accessibility
fantastic.
consultant.
Nice. Nice.
Because not only did I get to flex my accessibility muscles, but I got to be a giant nerd about the whole thing.
Oh, D&D.
Yeah, it's kind of like D&D. It's in that sort of same
Just
TTRPG
tabletop RPG.
But, oh my god, I got to be a huge nerd and read this entire lore. And
What was the system? What was the system?
I can't remember what it's called. I have it listed somewhere, and I'll have to send it to you at some point.
Okay.
Because I think you, of all people, would really love it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's very cool, Pixie. It's why the panel I used to be on was so damn important. It was a panel for accessibility on train travel in the UK and on the carriage design itself to aid in accessibility.
Nice.
That's super cool, Pixie, because in the US, there's still issues with trains not having the level of accessibility that they need,
Mhm.
particularly here in the Washington, D.C. area. We have a metro system where things like elevators are constantly broken.
And
It's
what the fuck are you supposed to do with that? I mean,
you, on a rare occasion you'll get a metro worker who says, "Hey, you can use this freight elevator with me. Come with me, and we'll help you."
yeah.
But the majority of the time, it's, "Well, we can help you up the escalator." No, fuck you. Do you know how unsafe that is?
I I would like to think that if I had been in your situation, that I would just fuck with people. I would just jump out of the chair and then just hold it and, like, lie on the escalator and just give the middle finger the entire way.
I'm not gonna say I haven't done that or something akin to that, but for legal reasons, for anyone who's listening, I haven't done that at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
Good friend of mine, named Jedi has been in a chair most of his life, and
Mm. I think we've
he
spoken
would
about
fuck
Jedi.
with people all the time. It was fantastic. I think it was I don't remember if it was EveCon or CastleCon, but he would get to the bottom of the escalator and push his wheelchair over, get one of the wheels going, and just be like, "Oh, ah," and just giggle when people tried to help him.
Yeah.
Um, there was, he would get out of the car and sit on the curb, and people would hand parts of his wheelchair to him, and he would put it together, and horrified people would rush up, "Why are you making him?" And it's like, "He's the only one that knows how to put it together."
Mhm.
It's his chair.
Yeah. It's like anybody who I ride with, if I, like, need a ride somewhere or if they come to pick me up for whatever reason,
Yeah.
even though I have my own car, they're all, a lot of them already know how to how to basically disassemble my chair
Yeah.
because we've been friends for fucking ages. I mean, how long have I known you?
Jesus. Over 30 years? Something like that?
Something like that, but we're not going to talk about that because we're old. Shh.
We old.
Yeah, but but if I go around with somebody new that hasn't driven me anywhere, regardless of
Mhm.
how long they've known me, they may not necessarily know how to take my chair apart, and so I
Yeah.
have to teach them.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's relatively simple with my type of chair.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Kata, says, "Andrew Gurza was who I was thinking of. Air Canada left my $30,000, Canadian money power wheelchair sopping wet yesterday on my flight from Toronto to San Francisco. They also mangled my power joystick to the point where I almost couldn't drive it. Then they had the audacity to get angry at me because I was angry. After all that, all they want to offer me is a $500 voucher to fly with them again. What the fuck?" I mm,
yeah,
just everything is so rage inducing.
I know it, and this is what I mean. Imagine being in these situations, though, Jada. Is we
Yeah.
deal with these kinds of things far too often.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's not okay.
it, and then that goes into liability issues, which goes back to what I was talking about earlier with things like sex ed and advocating for self with medical professionals as a person with a disability. There are actual fears from educators and doctors about liability,
Mm,
right? And that fear of liability is going to prevent a lot of teachers and any kind of healthcare provider, frankly, from addressing any kind of sexual well-being or healthy exploration
yeah.
or healthy communication about these things. And it even happens with believe it or not, it even happens with seasoned therapists.
Mm.
I actually had to leave a therapist many, many years ago because I was having some intimacy issues with the partner I was with right before I met my ex-wife. And this therapist refused to talk to me about these things because they were afraid of liability. And that is when it dawned on me that, well, it's not when it dawned on me. It's when it really solidified, hit home, that we as disabled people are not listened to when it comes to our own sexual well-being, whether that be the expression of sexual desire or questions about our sexual health, questions about sexuality in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because that's actually the point where I was questioning whether or not I wanted to still identify as bisexual. That's when it started. I didn't start identifying as queer until maybe 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when you are forced to face this, I'm not going to talk to you about XYZ because I don't want to be held liable for something. What that ethereal something is,
Yeah.
it can
Well,
change.
and who's to say whether? Sorry, who's to say whether that therapist you were working with even had the knowledge to try to understand where you were coming from and give you any helpful advice?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, when I go looking for things like therapy, whether it be psychotherapy, I've been in sexual therapy before. I've been in intimacy therapy, counseling. Um, I have been in psychiatric therapy before.
Yeah.
I always tend to try to look for therapists or providers who have experience with people with disabilities, B, people on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And
And I'm sure BDSM also helps if they're familiar with that.
it's few, those are few and far between, but
Yeah.
yes, especially if I'm looking for a therapist who can help with things like intimacy and or sex.
Mm.
Because as we grow, those of us in the BDSM scene know that our tastes can and do change.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Much like everything else throughout the course of our
right? Of
life.
course. I mean, mine have changed ever since I was introduced to the scene when I was like 20 years old. I mean, we're talking 27 years I've been doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I
So,
started back in 92, 93. Something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. So a little bit longer than me, but
Yeah.
who's counting?
Right. Is there anything else that you can think of that we haven't touched on?
Let's see. What haven't we touched on? Oh, okay. So I do feel the need to talk about one more thing, but this is going to be probably heavier than things that we have talked about all night.
Okay.
So, for those of you watching the VOD, those of you watching live, trigger warnings for sexual assault and sexual violence. Okay. Kids,
Mm.
kids with disabilities. Growing up with a disability is hard enough as it is. Okay. Um, Growing up female with a disability I mean, I don't know from personal experience, obviously, because the statistic worldwide and I shit you not, 90% of women with intellectual disabilities, and those can be things like, you know, Down syndrome or certain types of cerebral palsy or what have you, 90%, 9 in 10 women with intellectual disabilities growing up or as adults have been victims of sexual abuse. Between 40 to 70% of young girls with disabilities experience sexual assault before the age of 18.
Wow.
40 to 70%. Now, the number of boys who experience sexual assault before the age of 18, it's still abhorrent, but it's substantially less at 30%.
Ugh.
And that goes back to the whole predatory conversation we were having earlier, because people who prey on those they feel cannot defend themselves tend to go for people with disabilities because of the easier nature of the prey.
Well, and I would imagine that in their head, they're like, who are they going to tell? And how are they
Right.
going to tell? And
And
that's
will
just
they be listened to?
what,
You know, and
yeah,
that goes back to, you know, us, those of us with disabilities not being heard.
yeah,
And of course, you know, when a person that young is the victim of any kind of sexual violence, you know, it leads to things like loneliness, mental distress, mental disorders. Um, it becomes much, much more prevalent as a person enters adulthood due to things like social isolation or, you know, just the stigma around dating with a disability. You know, not to mention the trauma that a person has experienced, which can lead to things like, you know, PTSD and complex PTSD.
yeah,
So
yeah, which just the way that trauma resonates in the body.
it's rough. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really, really is.
yeah. And I've never really understood the idea that people who prey on others have that, well, it only took 5 minutes. Why are you so upset?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I just,
Because during those 5 minutes for the victim, it can seem like an eternity.
oh, yeah, especially if your body is responding. You know, I can't even imagine what kind of additional horror that adds. You know, well, I obviously liked it. It's like, no, that's a biological response. It doesn't
Right.
mean that you liked it. It just means that your soma responded, you
Yeah.
know? And
And
I go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but SJ made a good point, is that the prey sometimes can't stand up for themselves for years afterwards.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yes, that is 100% a trauma response. It
Yeah.
also can lead to people not being able to enforce boundaries in other aspects of their lives. You know,
Yeah.
and it's ridiculous that, I say ridiculous. I mean, it's disgusting. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
That high a percentage of people with disabilities are forced to be victimized like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And it
Dixie, we're right there with you. Right there with you, friendo.
and it takes so long to recover from a situation where you had every every possible sense of safety stripped from you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, especially good God, if it happens often, you can start doubting yourself. You can start doubting your ability to tell whether people are safe or not.
Yeah.
It is so destructive.
Yeah. Then on the flip side of that, though, I've found that a lot of us with visible disabilities or more severe disabilities, as we navigate life into our adulthood, it allows us to read people better, because we can come to a point where we know the type of person who is going to listen to us or who is going to be, not just cordial but friendly with us,
Yeah.
or even romantically interested or sexually interested if you're a romantic,
Yeah.
because I have an ex partner of mine, a former partner of mine, who I'm still very, very good friends with, who is completely aromantic. And we would get together for sex, just have a meal and then go have really good sex for hours on end.
And I mean, that's fantastic. That's the way it should be. You should be able to
Yeah,
engage in any activity that two consenting adults consent about.
right. And that goes back to the whole BDSM conversation. There are a lot of issues there too, in that a lot of people with disabilities are seen as fragile. I don't
Yeah.
want to do XYZ because I'm afraid of hurting you.
Yeah.
Let me tell you one thing. If for like a person like me, for instance, as of January of this year, I have gone under the knife 16 times.
Phew.
16 times.
Jesus.
I have a pain tolerance that would put a horse to shame. Okay? You're not gonna hurt me, A. And B, if I reach a point where I don't want to do it anymore, I'm gonna fucking tell you,
Mhm.
because I don't like being hurt non-consensually, you know?
Yeah.
Or if there is a BDSM practice that you're into and I'm not, I'm gonna fucking tell you.
Mhm.
And that's again where the whole consent comes into play. But if you enter if an able person enters into a relationship, whether sexual, romantic, or both, enters into a relationship where BDSM comes into play, you must listen to each other's consent. I mean, the whole, oh, you're disabled so you don't know what you're talking about thing does not apply ever,
Mhm.
right? You have to listen to that person's consent because they know their body better than you do.
Yeah.
There are going to be, like for me, for instance, there are certain positions that I can't get into because of the way my joints work or my back works, that sort of thing. There are certain things that I can't do because they are physically triggering to me because of sensations.
Mm.
Um, I have a friend of mine who I've known for, Jesus, decades, who can't do certain things because the just even the idea of it is psychologically triggering to her, because she was one of those girls who was a victim of sexual assault before she was at age of 18 as a disabled person.
Yeah.
you know and it really needs to be have more attention paid to it overall, in my opinion.
I would be so happy if schools actually had classes around consent at really young ages.
Oh, absolutely.
Consent around toys, consent around playing, consent around touching other children, You know, that needs to happen.
Really quickly,
Hmm.
Pixie Bomb just made a really good point. Um, they and I had a conversation a little bit ago because Pixie Bomb and I both share. Do you mind me talking about this, Pixie? I hope not. I really don't. About our mutual physical thing. Okay, so Pixie Bomb and I both share a disability after a fashion. We both have spina bifida. However, I have a version called spina bifida manifesta. She has they have spina bifida occulta, which is a less severe form of it, but comes with a lot of the same issues.
Mm.
Um, and they mentioned, I think I've had this exact conversation with Cripple, me. Disabled does not equal submissive or subservient. It
Ajay.
absolutely does not. I have had partners in the past who have, who I've met through the BDSM scene who immediately assume that I am a submissive because I am disabled. It's not true. I'm actually a switch. And those people who have met my more dominant side can tell you that I don't fuck around when it comes to my dominant side. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, I am something of a brat tamer. Shut up, Pixie. Don't even go there. Um, but I have a voice that I put on when I engage my dom side. Shut up, Kata. I see that. But I can also be submissive with the right person and with the right mindset.
Hmm.
It, it all depends on who I'm with and what the mood entails in the moment.
Oh yeah. I think a lot of people want to say that BDSM is always 100% this way. And
It's bullshit.
it's another lazy form of pigeonholing that means you don't have to think too hard about what you're saying.
I know, right? Because God forbid thought is involved.
Well, it's years ago I remember hearing this teacher asking young boys about consent. And they were like, "You mean you got to ask her every time? You mean
Yes.
you got to check with her like all the time throughout to make sure she's okay?" And the teacher was appalled. Yes, of course you have to. She's a
It
human
hurts.
being with agency and free will, for fuck's sake.
It hurts my brain. Oh my god.
It hurts my brain too.
I feel like a lot of this is when it gets to the point where a teacher or any kind of educator is having this conversation with their students, it's a failing of the parents.
Mm.
And it's almost indicative of the kind of relationships that the parents have had either with each other or in the past.
Well,
And
and I think that some parents don't feel comfortable about the idea of their kids having sex or being sexually active. It's a squick factor, much in the same way, kids are like, "Ew, parents having sex, gross." It's
right, right. I mean, the parents don't want to think about it until the point where they're like, when you're going to give us grandchildren?
oh my god. When do we get little short humans to play with? Fuck
Right.
off.
That we can spoil without any sense of responsibility.
Mhm. Mhm. And we can get all cracked up on sugar and then send back to you.
So funny you mentioned that.
Oh no.
I am an uncle of two lovely now young ladies,
Mhm.
but when they were kids, I was the babysitter. So my thing, I have always espoused the idea of that there are two types of uncles. There is the strict uncle who gives you advice and looks out for you, and right? Then there's the candy and money uncle. Guess which one I am? Yeah. I was the one who would sugar them up on things like ice cream and candy and all
Mhm.
kinds of, good food, and then give them back to their mother, my baby sister, who I am scared to death of now that she's a mother, ever since she's been a mother, because she would call me like an hour after they got home. Do you know what your niece just did? Wait. Why is she my niece and not your daughter? Because it's your fucking fault. Right. So, but yeah, I mean, and that actually brings up another good point, is that there are a lot of disabled people who choose to become parents, or who want to become parents, I should say,
Yeah.
and their medical providers, up until very, very recently, who would literally try to discourage either disabled women from giving birth or disabled men from becoming fathers.
Yeah.
Because A, can you actually do it? Like, can you physically do it? Or B, can you handle the responsibility of raising a child?
Yeah.
Shut up.
I mean, for fuck's sake, can able-bodied people handle the responsibility of
A
raising
lot
a
of times,
child?
no, God damn it.
Oh, I think Kata has said, I don't know if this is germane to the topic, but ideas on discussing or broaching sex with a disabled person you might be interested in if you're able-bodied.
Very good question, Kata.
Yes.
Very good question. So, I'm going to speak from my experience here. As I mentioned earlier, because of my own physical limitations, there are certain positions that I can't get into. All right. For example, my knees don't bend past, I want to say, like 90 degrees, 80 degrees ish, just due to previous surgeries. Also, I'm not able to straighten my legs all the way because of previous surgeries. So a lot of things, when you are in a relationship or starting a relationship with a person with a disability, one of the things that I would recommend doing is having a very frank conversation once you're ready. Having a very frank conversation about things like positional things, pain levels, sensation, um, triggers, like physical triggers, like can they be touched in a certain way without being triggered? Are there any places that we should avoid touching? Are there any issues with arousal? Because both men and women, at least in my experience with neurological disabilities, can have issues with arousal. So if as a femme presenting person, or as a femme person, you enter into a relationship with a man with a neurological disability and they need something like Viagra or Cialis, don't be offended. It's not you, it's probably their disability fucking with them. The reason they're taking this is because they want to be with you.
Yeah.
Okay. But a lot of the other things are going to revolve around positional issues and pain levels, especially for those people who experience things like fibromyalgia,
Oh.
or have had recent surgeries, or have arthritis or osteoporosis, things of that nature. It's important to have those conversations when the time comes, like when you are both very aware that there is that sexual chemistry or sexual attraction. Please have that conversation with a potential partner.
Oh, yeah. I'd go so far as to say if you can't have that conversation, you shouldn't be having sex.
100%. If you are not psychologically able to have that conversation, then you're not at the right point to be putting anything in anywhere.
Yeah. This is a supremely intimate act. and you're meeting someone where 99% of the populace doesn't meet them. You are in a very special liminal place of trust. And if you breach that trust, you don't get angry if that person doesn't trust you anymore.
No, fuck off. If you get pissy because you violated someone's trust, consent, or boundaries, get the fuck out. Just
Yeah.
go away and, isolate yourself somewhere.
Yeah. If
Think about
somebody
what you
tells you
sit in the
that
corner and
you've done something, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, sit in the corner and think about what you've done.
Yeah. If you've done something that made somebody feel uncomfortable and they explain to you what you did and how it made them uncomfortable, that's an opportunity for you to understand how to be a better person.
Right? It's it's a learning moment. You know,
It doesn't need
as
to be.
I am fond of saying, what did we learn?
Mhm.
Or as the aforementioned Valen Vane has recently taught me that he will say to his partner's child every now and again, behold the consequences of your actions.
Well, if it isn't the consequences of my actions.
I love it. I love it.
But it just being gracious and empathetic will go
There-
so far.
There's that notion, though, is the notion of empathy. I feel like we've reached a point, at least in American society,
Mhm.
we've reached a point where empathy is seen as weakness.
Well, there are books that are written by evangelical Christians of how empathy is a sin. Yep.
I
Yep.
feel like they need to hear that specific statement, those words that you just said,
Mhm.
and read them to themselves slowly.
I think they should write it 100 times on a blackboard like Bart. God damn it.
Facts.
But
Oh my God, that was great.
that the idea that providing space for someone's comfort and safety is not weakness. It's consideration.
It's kindness. It's allowing someone to be their authentic selves
Mhm.
with you and showing them that you will not violate that trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Neviversal. Did evangelicals ever hear of someone called Jesus?
Exactly.
Also, hi, Nevi. It's good to see you.
I just I wish that schools would prepare people for hard conversations.
Oh my God, yes.
And I also wish that we were taught conflict resolution.
This is actually one of the reasons that I double majored in both theater and psychology in college,
Mhm.
and that I've worked customer service for so long. I've been
Yeah.
in the customer service or client service field for fucking 26 years ish.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's important to have the conversations that can de-escalate problems,
Yeah.
you know, especially when it comes to relationships. You know, I used to be really not good at it. As I said before, I used to be a very angry young man. Even into my marriage, we would
Mhm.
get into screaming fights.
Oh, man.
So I have since tried to focus on really understanding my partners, whether they be abled or not. I've actually dated several disabled people in my
Yeah.
lifetime. And really understand where they're coming from. You know, I want to be able to not have things reach that peak where we're screaming at one another, or where things have even come to blows before.
Yeah. There is a way to resolve conflict that does not involve throwing things or screaming
Mhm.
at each other.
No, 100%.
And it's uncomfortable because you have to get to an uncomfortable, vulnerable place in order to address something that makes you supremely uncomfortable.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, having the uncomfortable conversations can make a person more comfortable in any kind of social interaction.
Oh yeah.
Period.
But we're terrified of uncomfortable conversations and we don't know how to have them because we're not taught how to.
Which is another. I mean, that harkens back to what I said earlier about, you know, people with disabilities not being seen or heard because it's uncomfortable.
Yep.
We are either made out to be objects of pity,
Mhm.
or we are made out to be invisible.
Mhm.
Oh my God! Speaking of objects of pity, that brings me. That actually had a flash of something from earlier. Um, I had a part. Well, I say a partner once because we were actually together for almost a year, until I found out that the reason that she started dating me was, by her own admission, out of pity.
It's what everybody wants to hear. Pity and
We as
flowers.
disabled people, we as disabled people,
Mm.
if we express interest in you, whether that be romantic, sexual, social, what have you, do not fucking want your pity. Ever.
Mhm.
Don't do it. All right. I was told by this person that I was a pity fuck, for
Jesus.
lack of a better term. I mean, that's not the phrasing that she used, but I was a pity fuck. Yes, exactly, Kata. Ew. Just ew. And the moment that this person told me this, I told her never to speak to me again. So
Good.
if you're gonna do that to somebody, I don't want you in my life. I don't want
Right?
you around me because you're disgusting.
Mhm.
And you clearly don't know how to respect other people, let alone respect a person with a disability.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. The very phrase "pity fuck," I don't. Oh.
it, it's unfortunately, Jada, it's unfortunately far more prevalent in the disability community than you might realize. Um, Especially for those of us with visible disabilities.
Mhm.
You know, people, regardless of their gender, will take it upon themselves to take pity on the poor disabled person and have sex with them, regardless of whether they actually want to or not.
Yeah.
And I've seen some people brag about it as
Ugh.
if it's some sort of like hero complex bullshit.
Yeah.
I've seen some people say, "Oh, it was just bad, blah 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 blah," and complain about it. It's like, you know what? If you're gonna do either of those, get the fuck out. Don't
Mhm.
ever speak to any single person in my circle of friends ever again,
Yeah.
because you're an awful human. You're an awful person.
Well, it's that whole "my dick is a gift" idea.
Okay.
Or "my pussy's a gift." I
Sure.
mean, it's
Okay.
I'm doing you a favor.
So
Come
funny
on.
you should phrase it that way,
Mhm.
because I find it way more prevalent in the male community. All right. I have had, men hit on me saying, "Well, you should be thankful that I'm offering you my dick because, you know, you wouldn't get it anywhere else."
Yeah, right. You're lucky. You're lucky that
Exactly.
I'm
You're lucky.
throwing you my dick and ass that I don't wash because that's gay.
I'm throwing you a bone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously.
I know.
If you want to feel that way that you're throwing me a bone, good for you.
Mhm.
Go do it somewhere else
Mhm.
because you're not that hot and you're not that charming.
Mhm. And it's always people who have appalling manners. And and the way they see the world is just horrific.
Yeah. Oh, and Pixie, yes. The I feel sorry for you, so I'm gonna be selfless, and fuck you. Yeah, selfless. Feck off, you selfish prick.
Mhm.
The beauty of that, Pixie, is I read that in your voice in my head. For those of you who don't know, Pixie has a lovely English accent, and when they get heated, can come out even thicker, and it's amazing to listen to when they just go off at the mouth. Yeah, keep
We
it
are
classy,
almost at 2
dudes.
hours
Okay.
here.
I know, right?
Holy
This is why I
cow.
love talking to people like you
I love
and all of
talking to
my
you
friends
too.
here in the chat. This is great. Thank you all so much for coming in and enjoying the conversation and
Yes, thank you.
engaging.
Thank you.
And you know what's funny is that a good portion of the people in the chat are also people with disabilities. So, thank you, friendos.
Yes, thank you so much.
Y'all are a big part of this, and y'all can go out and spread the message and take all of this knowledge and internalize it and learn some shit. And yes, learn some shit. Troll Doug, good times. Thank you, Kata. You're a sweetheart. Yeah, shit.
As we wrap up, is there
Hmm.
anything that you can think of that we didn't touch on?
Not that we didn't touch on, but I'm going to kind of summarize things that we as disabled people are still sexual creatures. The vast
Yeah.
majority of us. Yes, there are some asexual disabled people, as there are some asexual able people. But
Mhm.
don't assume that just because a person has a disability that they don't have sex or can't have sex. It's worth a conversation, especially if you find them intriguing, attractive, what have you.
Yeah.
Um, I am always open for DMs. If anyone wants to, you can get me on Twitch or Discord at One True Cripple. If you have me on Facebook, feel free to hit me up. I am also One True Cripple on Twitch, nay X. Um, but yeah, let's have conversations. Let's keep moving this kind of thing forward. Let's teach people about our experiences. But
Yeah.
I would also like to open it if you think you have time, Jada, for like 5 minutes.
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
I would also like to see if anybody in the chat has any questions they want to ask. Whether they be, I mean, if they're too personal, I'll say so. If they're not, great. But please ask questions
Yes.
of either myself or Jada, because I'm sure Jada has things that they can share. You know. Also, Jada, I'm really digging the green.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm really happy with it myself.
so cool.
I like looking like a forest nymph that will punch you in the throat.
I mean, you would though.
I would. It's true.
Yeah. All right. I'm not seeing questions yet. But I really again want to thank you guys for coming in.
Oh, thank you, Kata.
Bogwitch
Bogwitch
vibes.
vibes. It's exactly what
Yeah.
I'm going for. Outstanding. Thank you. I feel validated.
Kata, it's like you know Jada, because that's exactly the kind of thing they do.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
All right. But yeah, I mean, any of y'all ever have questions or want to talk about shit, just DM me. I'm always open. I'm an open book pretty much.
Yeah. And it's
And
it's
thank you, Jada,
good
for
that
giving
more
me this
people.
opportunity.
Oh, I'm so glad that you could come on and talk about this. I'm so grateful.
I really appreciate it.
Besides what you've already said, is there anything in general you hate hearing? That's a great question.
Oh my God. Um, so funny you ask that, SJ, because there is a college here in the US called Stanford University. And a little while back, say a little while, I'm not exactly sure how many years ago, but they did a thing called Push Project, which is up on YouTube. And I'll give Jada the link here to post. But it was shit people say to people with disabilities, which makes me think about a thing I used to do when I was in high school, and those of you in the UK called secondary school. I used to do these disability discussion panels where we'd take 4 or 5 of us with disabilities and go around to classes and talk about our disabilities and our lives. And the constant question is, are you sexually active? Can you have sex? Do you experience romantic interest? And the answers were always, at that point in my life, were yes, yes, and yes. But again, my sarcastic ass would go to things like, are you sexually active? As often as possible. Do you have sex? Quite frequently. And, you know, do you experience romantic interest? Why are you interested?
Nice.
Especially if they were an attractive person. And there was one person, I don't know how this happened, but was in almost every single class that we went to speak to, regardless of what that class was. So I would make it a point to single this person out and pick on them like a comic heckling a heckler back.
Outstanding.
It was just my thing. But yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things that
It's always, so how do you fuck? Why?
frequently.
Like, why is that the one thing that, like, out of every possible human experience?
Because A, people are morbidly curious, and B, tact is a dying skill.
True. True.
I mean,
How do you fuck
now,
loudly?
to
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha, bravo.
Oh, yes.
But SJ, to kind of summarize the answer to your question, it's not that I hate hearing these things, it's that I hear them far too often.
Mm.
It's ridiculous. And I am not a person who enjoys repeating themselves unless it is to actually educate another person. And if I can do that by sharing my experiences, I'm gonna.
That's one of the reasons I love you.
Aw. This is why we're friends, Jada.
Exactly. I tend to think that there are a lot of people who center their experience within shame and guilt. And so they
Far too
don't
often.
talk about it. And this is why shame and guilt exist, to keep you from sharing your story with other people so that we can all learn from each other.
especially, and again, going a bit dark here, especially when one is a victim of things like sexual assault or sexual abuse as a
Yeah.
person with a disability, we are shamed into not telling our story. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I was the victim of a male stalker 8 years ago ish, who I had met through the DC goth scene, and he would constantly pressure me to come have sex with him, and he would tell me he knew where I lived and all this kind of thing, even though he lived a state and a half away. you know and it got to a point where I literally almost had to file a police report.
Jesus.
So we're shamed into silence, basically. But that again can be reversed by learning more about ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
taking the initiative to express ourselves in a way that we're comfortable with, and in a way that is impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You
for
know,
any able-bodied people who are watching this, pick up a book.
please,
Read.
holy shit,
Please
pick up
educate
books.
yourself.
Yeah,
You know,
in fact,
there are a fair number of books on the topic of the way that disabled people are treated in this country and throughout the world. Educate yourself.
yes, Kata, education is armor. You
Yes, it
are
is.
100% correct.
Yes, it
And
is.
yes, for Jada, if you didn't know, Kata used to be an educator.
Oh, very cool.
So she is awesome with that. Bravo.
Yeah, the more literally, the more you know, the richer life becomes.
Right?
Because the basic story that we're all told is you work so you can find somebody that is attractive to have sex with you, and then you can have kids with them, and then they can have kids, and so on and so on. And that's just skeevy as fuck to me. There's so much more in life.
Right.
And
But to the certain subsect of the U.S. political population that you referenced earlier, that's all people are good for is breeding,
yeah.
right?
And that's a 100% we're animals. You
Right.
know, it's we may as well not have invented anything. We may as well not read anything because all we're doing is fucking and pumping out babies.
Right.
And we're not educating ourselves on how not to express our trauma responses all over each other and continue re-traumatizing each other.
Exactly. Oh, and SJ, good question. Going into kink events or play events, are they accessible? So I've only ever been to two kink events, in like actual physical kink events in this general metropolitan area. And one was up a very narrow flight of stairs. Thankfully, I have some very strong friends. The other, I had to enter via a back door around a metal gate, which was annoying.
Hmm.
So, as far as accessibility, I'm going to say no. Because, again, people think that anything revolving around sex, you're not going to want sex or eroticism.
Hmm.
You're not going to have the disabled population there with you. When in point of fact, if you made things accessible, you could attract the disabled population. I mean, it's the whole field of dreams thing. If you build it, they will come.
Hmm. Oh, quite literally.
You know what, Jada? I didn't think about it until it came out of my mouth. You said it. Holy shit. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
God damn it. Oh my God. Why
Oh.
did I not think about that before I said it?
It's supposed to go in your mouth.
You know what, Pixie? Shush. We'll talk later. Shut up.
Well, I think
Have
that's
we reached?
probably a good ending point.
I mean,
We're at
why not
2.
end? Why not end on a great joke?
Oh,
Come on.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I believe the question was the same problem inside the event?
No, no, because it was 2 floors, yes, but they had a great freight elevator that I had free reign of,
Well, the
and
nice thing
the
about
organizer
BDSM
was a friend of mine.
events is that there's usually a fair amount of room because
Yeah,
you've got multiple tables, you've got multiple St. Andrew's crosses, you've got where the rope bunnies are playing, I mean, and there's enough room to
Prince
swing.
Andrew's Cross.
Yeah.
You make me all squiggy. Oh, it's great. Damn it, Jada.
Guess you gotta go to another BDSM event, my friend.
You know what? I'm working on it.
I need to
Elevator
get out as
sex.
well.
Been there, done that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to go any
Nice.
further than that, but been there, done that.
Nice. Oh, yeah, he's adorable when he's flustered.
You know what? You know what? Pixie, Jada, the both of you.
Oh, no. No, no. I will not
No,
be
I know.
silenced.
I can't make either of you shush. I don't know why I try. I just feel the need to mention it.
I know. I know. It's so cute.
In
I
fact,
wanna
I feel
thank
like y'all would get along famously.
I really wanna thank everybody who joined us today. Thank you for the
Yes.
really great questions and the interactions.
I know. Y'all have been just like super talkative, and I really, really appreciate the interaction myself.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the anecdotes. And thank you, Jada, for allowing me to come on and run my mouth and be a ranty, ranty asshole.
Old man rants at St. Andrew's Cross.
I am stealing that, and that will be the title when I repost this VOD. Old man rants at St. Andrew's Cross. Holy shit, that's brilliant.
I love you, man. I love you, my brother. And
I love you too.
I'm so grateful for you coming on
Mwah.
tonight. This has been really great.
And for all of you in the chat, y'all know I love you too. I see you all the time. I will talk to you all when I talk to you all. And Jada, I will talk to you when I talk to you. I hope that you can come see me soon.
Yes. We gotta make that happen now that I'm retired from corporate life.
Retired from corporate
Retired from corporate
life.
life. Yes.
All right, my friends.
Everybody have a great night and thank you for joining us.
Good night, friendos.
Good night.